Welcome to the Bold Book of the Day with Dr. Denise Nicholson, a show that is a central hub and safe space for authors to share their stories. The Bold Book with Dr. Denise begins now.
Hello, welcome back to the Bold Book of the Day podcast. This podcast is for anyone looking for inspiration. And today we have a story that stopped me right in my tracks when I read it. And I think it is going to be the same way for you too when you listen. Imagine two young men from the same small town in Illinois. Both became they both become navigators on the B-24 bomber in World War II. Both fly missions to destroy the same target, the oil refinery of Plotis, Romania. And both in the years before that wrote hundreds of letters to the same woman. Today's guest spent more than a decade piecing that story together, traveling to Romania, Germany, traveling to Romania, Germany, and England, and across America, reading every letter, tracing every mission, honoring every sacrifice. She is a litigation paralegal, a daughter and a niece, and now a remarkable author. Please welcome let me make sure I say it right. Cress Dondi, right?
You got it. You got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Please welcome.
Thank you so much for that introduction. It was beautiful. I'm so honored to be on your show. I'm excited to talk about this story.
Jen, I'm excited to hear. This is so intriguing. Tell us a little bit more about who the men are and how you became involved.
So the two men, Bob and John B., are my father and uncle. And my whole life I've known this story. I've heard this story or heard bits and pieces of it. When the story is in essence a World War II, two guys that are facing they become B-24 navigators, like you said. They both were from the same small town. They're friends. One went to the 8th Air Force in England. The other went to the 15th Air Force in Italy. And somehow both of them found themselves over the Ploesti oil fields, which was Hitler's fuel source, and both were shot down. The uncanniness of the two of them being shot down over the same target, going missing in action for quite some time, is the root of the story. And I guess because my whole life I heard little bits of this, I wanted to know more. My father, Bob, was good about answering any questions when I was little growing up. And actually, most kids got bedtime stories of fairy tales. Well, I got bedtime stories of dive bombing Stukas and enemy interrogations.
My goodness.
Things like that.
You didn't have nightmares?
You know what, you would think so, but they were told in such a friendly way that it would. He actually made it sound like a 007 story. There was a parody in a magazine back in the 60s about Oi Oi 7, 007, Israel Bond, not James Bond. So I always learned these stories of Oi Oi 7. So it was sort of a spy story. So they weren't scary. But I didn't know at the time what they really were from, but I think part of it was Bob had PTSD, and I think it was a slow release of telling these stories when I was, little. And I mean, he was fluent in German, so he would tell these stories of enemy interrogations with a curt German accent. So they were sort of entertaining stories, and they would put me to, I'd go to sleep afterwards. But there were walks in the parks growing up, and he would always show me the stars. I wish I could remember them all. He would always point out the North Star. That's, you'll always find your way home. Cassiopeia, Orion's belt, whatever. And then as I was growing up, I would always ask questions about John B. I knew John B. He was my uncle, but I learned what their relationship was. And it wasn't until when my mother passed away, I discovered in the basement hundreds of letters from both of these men to Polly and the family. So I started reading them. At first, I couldn't do it. I was still working as a litigation paralegal, so I couldn't really get into them. It wasn't until my daughters grew up, and life happens, and you're working, and you don't have time to do things. So it wasn't until I had a little sadness in my life. My mother, my sister, and my niece passed away about the same time.
Oh,
And at
wow.
the same time, I discovered these letters. So what I feel like the letters were a distraction to the sadness.
Mm.
So as I live in Fort Lauderdale, but my family, the three were up in Atlanta. So I spent a lot of time up in Atlanta, ended up having to retire because I was sort of the family member that could be with them up there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what was bittersweet, we'll say that, I had these
Mm.
letters, and so I was reading them as I was up there. So it was sort of a distraction. And but and I'll tell you, it was like 500 or 600 letters. And I would read them, and just that piece of history within your hands, I felt like I had to do something with them. My father had already passed away, John B had already passed away, and my mother passed away. So reading them was cathartic. And I thought, I've got to do something with these, because they're a piece of history that it just needed to be told. All
Yeah.
servicemen were going through what these two men were going through. And I felt like if we don't remember these stories, these war stories, they become abstract, and we lose what the real meaning is with war. I'm probably getting into a lot more, but I started out with making a chronology of the letters, but that wasn't good enough. I wanted to match it with the National Archives. So I went through the National Archives and did a chronology. It took years really to get the operations reports, the bomb group diaries, the missing aircrew reports, the official records, all that stuff, to blend them into the letters, which is really what ended up coming up to be the book.
So this is your father and your uncle's story.
Yes. Yes. It's Bob and John B.,
Yes.
my father and uncle.
Mm-hmm.
And they knew each other. They're not brothers, but they knew each other before the war. They grew up in the same small town of 4,000 people, tiny little Illinois town.
But they're not brothers.
They're not brothers.
So
They're
how
not
is he
brothers.
your uncle?
He's it was Polly is my uncle's little sister.
Mm-hmm.
So she is my mother.
Ah,
Which,
okay.
spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
Right. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about John B. White.
So John B. Was a good student. He was the oldest of 5 children. They lived in town, small little town of Hillsboro, Illinois. He was sort of the golden child of the town. He was always in plays. He was always, he excelled at school. He knew a lot of people. He went on to the University of Illinois. He graduated from there, and he went to law school in Chicago. And then he returned to Hillsboro to practice law when he was called to serve. And he was called to serve before Pearl Harbor. So they had a draft. FDR, President Roosevelt, signed the Selective Service Act back in, I'm not sure, 42 or 41, might have been 39, I'm not sure. And so his number came up. So before Pearl Harbor, they were trying to make sure that we had servicemen prepared if something was to go on. But it was at a time when everybody believed in isolationism, which we didn't want to get involved in the European war, because we felt we were far enough away to that. But then Pearl Harbor happens. So John B. was catapulted into service. He wanted to become a pilot. He didn't do well on the piloting, but because he was a smart guy, They put him into navigation. Navigation, they didn't have GPS then. I don't know how they figured out how to get where they had to go, but they calculated it. They had like a slide rule of sorts, and then they would calculate. They would have a little machine, a gadget called a sextant. They'd take pictures of the stars, and they could triangulate where they were. I don't know how. I mean, I can barely go out of town without GPS on my phone. So, but he was catapulted into when Pearl Harbor happened. They didn't have any men in the service, so that were trained. So he went through navigation school, became a navigator. His B-24, he crewed a B-24. He started out in anti-sub patrol in the Gulf of Mexico, which is interesting. They had the Germans had U-boats circling the Gulf of Mexico underneath, and because a lot of the tankers with oil were coming out of Houston, out of that area. So his training was looking for U-boats in the Gulf of Mexico.
Okay.
One of his brother planes shot one or bombed them. Then he goes over to Europe, goes to England. His B-24 is the 6th to land on England. So he's the first group to go over to England, the B-24 group. So his group was the first B-24 in action, in combat over there. So that's sort of how he got over there.
So tell us a little bit more for listeners who don't know anything about Operation Tidal Wave. Set the scene, August 1st, 1943, what that mission was like.
So the mission was very well planned. They spent a lot of money on it. Back in those days, I think John B.'s letter. John B. was flying around the one of the leaders, the commanders that was in charge of logistics, and so he would hear things and write back home. And he was actually a censorer, so he knew what he could write back home. He said at one point he thought they were spending $20 million, then $50 million. So in 1943 days, I don't know what $50 million is, but it's a lot of money on one mission.
Right.
They made a Hollywood movie for briefing the guys so that they would know, so that there would be consistency in what they were training these guys on. And what they did, they sent 3 experienced groups from England down to North Africa, from the 8th Air Force. And this will get complicated, but the 8th Air Force was in England. 3 groups down to England. John B. was one of those 3 groups. They had 2 groups from the 9th Air Force out of North Africa. And the deal was they were going to send 5 bomb groups, and each bomb group has about 36 planes. So it added up to about 170 planes. They were to take off on August 1st from Benghazi, North Africa, fly 12 hours to Ploesti, Romania, Hitler's primary fuel source. The idea was they were going to fly low level, which is like 50 feet to 150 feet above the ground. And that's just over your house. I mean, it's not I can't imagine 170 bombers carrying full fuel bomb load and breezing right over your house. I mean, it's crazy. But they went across the Mediterranean and the Adriatic. They get to the area in Greece, and then they turn toward Ploesti, Romania. The idea was to fly low level under radar. They did it without with radio silence. That means they couldn't talk to another plane. So what happened along the way, 2 groups got ahead, 3 groups dropped back. So they weren't together going into the target. As they were getting closer to the target, the first bomb group from the 9th Air Force made a wrong turn. And John B.'s group had to follow them, because that was, you just had to follow the wrong turn. So once they decided it was a wrong turn, John B.'s group made the left turn to the correct turn. The problem with the left turn, it brought them to the south side of the target, which was the heaviest defenses. the plan brought them to the north side where there were fewer defenses. So John B's group went as a single unit, not with the other 4 groups, over the target. And it was just a chaotic, hellish mission, because they were coming in at 50 feet and the Germans were ready for them. They
could see them wide open.
Right open. It was point blank range. I mean, the gunners in the bombers could see the guys' faces.
So what happened to them? Did they all they didn't all pass, but what happened?
Well, so they went over the target. John B's group lost half of their planes. They lost 17 or 18 planes on that mission. John B went missing in action on that day. What part of the chaos was, the 3 groups that were behind came from the north. So you got 3 groups coming from the north and John B's group coming from the south. So they're crossing. There's black smoke everywhere. They can't see anything. There's just bombardment. It was just chaotic, crazy. And John B went missing that day together with 532 other men. They started out with probably 1,700 men that morning, took off from Benghazi. 10 of the planes didn't make it to the target. So probably 1,600 men went over the target. 532 didn't make it back. So they lost a quarter of the men that day. And it was considered, they called it Black Sunday because they lost so many men on that day. Costliest day in history for up to that point.
Okay, so he wasn't killed during that mission.
Well, I'm going to tell you that your readers
will have to read it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to know.
Missing in action.
Okay. So then 9 months later, your father, Bob Cress, from the same town.
Right. Bob. So Bob
flies his own mission. And what happened to him? Well, I don't know if you want to tell us.
So he
This is a twist.
And so he was with the 15th Air Force, to make it more confusing. The 15th Air Force was out of southern Italy. When the reason it took 8 or 9 months to get them going to Ploesti again was because they had to get closer. And from North Africa to Italy, it was that much closer, but it was still, I don't know, a 6 or 8 hour flight up to Ploesti. So my father Bob had been on one mission to Ploesti, and he wrote home, "I've been to a place where John B was last seen. I don't ever care to go back there," because the defenses were just unmatched. Hitler had made Ploesti fortified, second only to Berlin, the capital of Germany. So Bob goes a second time over, and his plane is shot down and he goes missing in action. So we've got 2 guys from the same small little town, both B-24 Navigators, both connected by one woman, both shot down and both missing in action.
Oh my goodness. Guys, just go out and get the book, please, because it seems like it has a lot of twists and a lot of turns, and it's a page turner.
Right. I think it is. I think when you understand what these guys went through, so I took a ride on a B-24 Liberator because I wanted to get a sense of what it was like to go on a plane. And just so you know, each of these guys are tethered to the airplane itself. They've got a heat suit on because at altitude it can get minus 60 degrees. So they've got a line that goes to a plug-in to heat this suit. They've also got headphones to listen to the communications within the plane, and it's tied to a plug. They've also got, at altitude, because the airplane itself has open waist windows, that's so they can have the machine guns out. You've got breezing temperatures going through. They have to wear oxygen masks, so they're connected to a line. Once they get over the target, all right, so they can't move very much. Once they get over the target, and they're freezing cold, that's one thing. The next thing is they've got these puffs of black mushroom clouds, and lethal shrapnel comes out of these. And so these planes are flying formation, wingtip to wingtip, and they're flying into these black clouds. It looks like a bunch of dirty dots that you could walk on, and they're exploding. And if they make a direct hit on a bomber, it can send the bomber down. If they drop their bombs and get out of the target, you've got enemy fighters that are coming at twice the speed that the bombers fly, and they're shooting to kill. If they shoot through the thin aluminum skin of the plane, it could cause a fire. Hydraulic lines could burst, and it causes a fire. So these guys are not only fighting fires on board, they're fighting the enemy fighters. So if they're lucky enough to land back at their base, they're met with a shot of whiskey to calm them down from the day, and they kind of walk to their tents. They might pass an empty tent where their friends had been shot out of the sky that day. They walk to their tent. All they want to do is decompress. They want to write a letter home, and they want to say who's dating who's marrying who, what did you eat for dinner last night. Their letters were lifelines home, because they knew they had to go back and face the same stuff the next day. So it was really
like a reality check.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Who? So underneath all of that, I know, underneath all of that, there is a thread that binds everything together. What is that thread?
So Polly sort of is the thread. Polly is a devil-may-care girl. She's John B's little sister. She's Bob's friend, lifelong friend. So Polly and John B live in town. Bob is the son of a dairy farmer. He lives out of town, but Bob went to school in town. He befriended, to make it more complicated, Polly's twin brother. And so
is this all true?
Whatever. What's that?
This is all true. There's no.
This is all true. All true.
Okay.
So Bob was always at John B and Polly's home growing up, just because he was hanging out with the twin brother.
Yeah.
So he knew John B. John B was the older brother. He always looked up to John B, and I think everybody in the town looked up to John B. And so he knew him well. He sort of followed in his path. Bob wanted to be a lawyer. At the time he was drafted or called to serve, he was headed to law school at Harvard. He was a sophomore in college, but that's what his sights were on. And so and it was partially because John B was a lawyer. And but Polly, getting back to Polly, she was a devil-may-care spirit. She was fun loving. She was very kind. She was the one that sent cookies to a bunch of guys. In that box of letters I found were a bunch of letters to Polly. So Polly always had boyfriends. She had a list of boyfriends as long as your arm, but Bob never really got into the friend zone or beyond the friend zone. Bob was one that she would call when they were in college. She was in her sorority house or sorority group, and they'd go out and get drunk, the girls, and she would be sick or something. So she'd call Bob rather than her brother, because her brother would tell her parents. So Bob would come. He wouldn't want to rescue her, but he would be the one that would rescue her. So they were just good friends all along. So she was sort of, Bob did write Polly, but Polly also got a lot of letters from a lot of other men. So
Polly was a hot girl.
She had a lot of fun. We'll just say that.
I don't blame her.
Yeah.
She was young. She's got it. And that's what you do. You enjoy, you enjoy your life.
Right. Yeah.
Now, tell me, it sounds like you are so passionate about these stories. And I believe it stems from the younger you listening to these stories at night.
So it's true. I've always known this story. I didn't know as much as I learned. I didn't know anything about World War II when I started this. I don't think they taught it in school. I learned a lot. So the book carries you through tidal wave, which was that zero altitude mission, 50 feet above the air, through the high altitude missions that Bob did with the 15th Air Force, through to what I learned more about Operation Reunion, which was the repatriation of some 1,200 POWs from Romania back to American air bases in Italy, with the Tuskegee Airmen flying cover to protect these guys coming back. So I learned so much about the oil campaign through these two men. Part of it was the research, and part of it is the two men that are in the story are just two airmen. It's the story of every airman, really, what they had to go through to become this. I have so much respect for servicemen that have to leave their families, and like right now, it's all about the oil in Iran. It's a lot about the oil in Ukraine. Oil is a big deal when it comes to war. And we know the battles, we know what happened at D-Day, but do we know why D-Day was? What was it all about? So I think that's part of it was a learning curve for me to learn all of this, and I really wanted to get the story. I wanted to go to a wider audience. That's why it took so long to get a real publisher, and to I could have self-published it, but I knew I needed more help to get it out.
Two questions. What is the most important message that you want your audience to get from this story?
I think that's a good question. I think that these were ordinary guys. All servicemen are just guys that want to be with their families, be with their loved ones. But these airmen were taking on extraordinary times. There weren't many planes before World War II. I mean, World War I, they had dogfights with single engine planes, but it was usually they had a pistol or, but this is where they're carrying bombs. And if you get shot, the whole plane can blow. And, or, if you're unlucky. And it was a lot about luck and fate. You could have the best pilot in the whole wide world, but if you happen to get hit, that's it. It's it. And I truly believe these guys just wanted to do their job, their duty, so that they could get back home. They wanted to make the world a better place. And I think all servicemen, they don't want to be away from their families. And I think it's a story of that. These guys didn't want to be away from their families, and they just wanted to do what they had to do and come back home.
And the next question is, what is the most important lesson you learned during the research time?
I think I didn't give Bob and John B. the credit that they deserved. I realized in all this research that what they did was extraordinary. And I give them so much credit. I wish that both of them had been around for me to say, hey, how'd you think, did I do a good job on the book? Did I read it well? And I will say, I found a 102-year-old general, and I befriended him, and I love this man. And I gave him a copy of the book because I wanted to see if he was actually a P-51 fighter pilot during World War II. And I wanted to make sure that I did a good, it was authentic and respected them. And he read it, and he said, it took me back, it reminded me of where I was. I captured the tenor of the times, and it was an honest and powerful portrayal. His words meant the world to me, because I would love for my father and my uncle to be able to say, yep, you did all right.
Yeah. So I'm glad you had that moment, that opportunity, because it did something for you. But can you imagine what it did for him?
When I flew in that B-24 Liberator, we only flew at 2,000 feet over the Everglades.
Mm-hmm.
And but it was a crazy, the aluminum skin was thin. It was not like a commercial plane. And I've been in small planes. You want to take off and get up high to get the air, because when you fly low, the thermals get you. The thermals make it more unsteady.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine at 50 feet how that pilot flew that plane, and then the navigators had to figure out how to get back home as fast as they could. It just blows my mind what they did.
Wow. Tell us a little bit more about your relationship with your mother, and knowing the stories that your dad was telling you throughout your years. How did you look at your mother?
Um, she's always been a fun-loving woman. I didn't know until I read the letters. And I will tell you, when I read the letters, it was sort of a mix. Do I share these letters or do I not? It's a personal thing. And I didn't share any gooey stuff.
Yeah.
I shared more the military end of it. But I mean, they signed their letters, love and kisses, John B., or love and
Yeah.
kisses, Bob. And when I read those letters, it was sort of like, when I was 18, the letters were no different. They just cared about one another. And today we don't write letters. We write texts, and we're real quick about it and everything. And
Yes.
you wonder, when I went through those letters, it could have been my daughter's generation, my generation. Every generation just loves it, and it goes through generations. And I think I learned that I was amazed at what they talked about, because you don't think about that with your parents. You don't remember, you don't think of them as being teenagers, and and what they were experiencing, or in their 20s. And I give them a lot of credit for what they said in those letters, because they were meaningful. And we don't do that today. We don't really give our feelings on paper. We
It's
just
a lost art.
It is a lost art.
Hmm.
Absolutely. And we need to start doing it. And
But we have books and we have authors like
right.
yourself who did the research. My goodness gracious. You had read hundreds of letters.
The hundreds of letters, and I will say 100,000 documents from the National Archives, in addition to books. I mean, it was, to blend it. It had to be authentic. Um, so it was just, that was the way it was. And I joined the bomb group. I went to
What is the
England.
bomb group?
My uncle's bomb group is still
It just sounds
active.
like the bomb.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it is the bomb, and it's a bold thing. I joined it because I thought I could probably learn more, and so I still go to their reunions now. And I went to Bob's POW reunion, which is really what started. The letters kick-started everything, but
Hmm.
then meeting the POW reunion people, there were probably about 10 POWs remaining at that time that were still alive. My father had already passed away, but I befriended them, and I ended up going to Romania. And there were 5 of us, 5 children and our spouses, that went over there. My sister was one of them, so we had 2 out of the 5. And the CNN affiliate drove us around, because we went to the prisoner of war camp. We went to where Bob's plane actually blew up. I actually spoke at the embassy in Bucharest about Bob's visit. We were entertained by the defense minister. It was awesome. But then we go to Germany, and because I got the pilot that took credit for Bob's plane. And I went to Germany to get his records. So I went to the archives there. I went to England a couple of times. We went to the airfield that John B. used to take off from. And I think that was probably one of the most emotional. And I got into the airfield because the bomb group was able to get onto the farmer's property. And it's still there. It's a little chewed up a little bit, but the actual airstrip is still there. And standing on the airstrip was probably the culmination of my research and writing. I was quite emotional because I could imagine the bombers taking off every 30 seconds. A bomber took off. I mean, that's fast. And then they get up they have to circle around to get to rendezvous. I'm telling way too much, too much information, but it was so emotional to me. I mean, it got me. And
Yeah.
so this is truly a labor of love, this story. It's
Yeah.
and I hope your listeners will at least take a look at it.
Yes, please do share where can they find your book.
So it's on any major outlet, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, independent stores. So you can get it anywhere. It's now on Audible. So you can listen to it if you're walking. A lot of people Audible now do Audibles. We did a lot of, when my editor went through the book, she did a book for George Bush, and she wanted to make sure that everything was authentic and backed up. So we ended up, I had written it in third person. She wanted to hear the men's voices. So we ended up going back to, I videoed, I had radio debates, all kinds of things. We went back to that, and I had to put in italics. Everything in italics are the two men's voices. So I hope when the readers read the book, they'll hear a Midwestern voice from two awesome men. And I think it'll be more compelling because it's them telling you the story. Actually, Bob wrote two of the chapters in the book, a book on Chicago that's a very tender chapter, and the introduction,
What do
and
you mean
many
Bob
anecdotes.
wrote that?
Bob, so back in, they were sworn to secrecy after World War II, not for 50 years, not to tell anything about the war, the sadness of the war, and their friends being shot down. And I think that those guys had PTSD because they couldn't get anything out. So when he
Because
started
they were
going,
sworn to secrecy, and
they were,
now we're getting studies that shows that when you can share your story, part of the healing is sharing the story, getting it out of your head, getting new connections and new pathways to what's happening, and creating an ease, because you can release from the pressure of holding it in.
You're absolutely right. And that's the other reason why these guys were so great. They held it in, and a lot of them drank, or they, PTSD. A lot of them did that. But I think when they started getting together in their POW and bomb group reunions, they started saying, hey, why do we have to keep this a secret? Why can't we tell everybody about
Yeah.
this? It feels good to tell stories. And so I think Bob came back, and he started writing his memoirs. And it was so I feel like this is partially finishing what he started. He died of lung cancer, but before that, we were able to get about 8 hours of video of him telling the stories, and then
That's
I
beautiful.
go
Did
back.
you get to play some of that at your book launch?
Not at the book launch. Interesting. I probably should have. That's a good idea. I didn't at
Yes.
the book launch, but it's throughout the book.
Yeah.
And John B. had radio debates and speeches that were transcribed and written. So much of the book is based on their words. And I think that's probably the more authentic part of it too, as well.
I am so happy that you did this project, and I'm happy because I love stories and I love healing, and I believe that this was healing for the people who were involved, not your father because he died, but people that were involved in the war,
Right.
or a war, so that they can
Right.
read and see some kind of, the word that I'm looking for is, to see something that reminds them, some familiarity, with what they're going through, and find healing through that connection.
Exactly. You're so insightful, and I agree. If we've got to tell these stories so that people can
Mhm.
relate to them because they've had experiences.
Yeah.
And I will say, if you're ever going through sadness, you need a distraction. You need a project, a distraction, and sometimes it's reading or listening to a story that can do it.
Yes. And please tell the audience again, where can they find your book?
I'd love for them to get it on any of the platforms, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, independent stores, anywhere, Spotify, Apple, all those have the audibles.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear what everybody thinks. You can also go to jancressdondi.com. It tells you a little bit more of the story. You can contact me through there. And again, I would love to hear what people think about the book. And I've got some pictures on the website that aren't in the book. And so yeah, so go there, and I'd love to hear what everybody thinks.
Thank you again. You mentioned that your book was published traditionally. Can you give us a little bit of an insight on what is the advantage of publishing through traditional publisher?
So my goal, the original book that I made was a book to my cousins. I wanted them to know how awesome their uncles were.
Yeah.
But then one of my cousins said, "Hey, this is kind of a good story. You might want to take it further." And I always wanted to take it further because I wanted everybody to know what John B. and Bob did.
Yeah.
So the trick to that is I'm a first time author. I had to get an agent. That was the first thing. In order to get a traditional publisher, you've got to get an agent. So I was lucky enough. I was fortunate enough to get one. You have to write 100 and maybe one will stick. That agent got a publisher. The publisher had the editor. And the reason I wanted to go traditional publishing was I knew that support would help me get into different independent stores. And lucky for me, we had the launch on the aircraft carrier Intrepid in New York City,
Oh,
which was
wow.
which was so amazing. And we were amongst World War II warbirds on Hangar 2. I will say it was in February. There were ice chunks in the river. It was freezing cold, but
That's
it was so awesome to be there. And now it is a USA Today bestseller. So I'm so happy that we've gotten it to that point. And we're still working it. And I'd still like everybody to know it's a bestseller, which tells me John B. and Bob's story is really meaningful to a bunch of people.
Thank you so much. Now, guys, I know you're listening. Most of you listening are either authors or budding authors. So we just wanted to give you some pros and cons for traditional publishing. The credibility, of course, and prestige of being selected by a publisher, and there's no upfront cost. But then with self-publishing, you have full creative control. You have higher royalties, of course. And then there's a speed because you have to wait on finding an agent and then publishing your book and then,
Yes.
Going through that process. So it could take about 3 years.
Yes, exactly.
Roughly.
It took a long time.
Yeah. Now, with self-publishing, it's much faster. You can do it within 90 days
Yes.
to 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
And then you keep all rights to your work. You get a direct connection to your readers and your community because when you sell to them, you have their email addresses, you have contact. When your book is done by a traditional publisher, of course, you don't have that. So
absolutely.
So consider both and look at the pros and the cons of both. And then if your dream is to publish traditionally, then do the things that are necessary, get out there and start working on getting your agent, and then you move from that point on.
Yeah. Absolutely. There are pros and cons to both. I will say to get a traditional publisher, you have to put together a proposal. You give away the rights to your book. You really don't sometimes they'll ask you, but they didn't ask me anything about the cover. The cover, they didn't ask
just
me
saw the
anything
cover and was
about,
like, okay.
There's a lot that you give it away. You're giving it away. So there's a lot of control with self-publishing.
Yes.
It's just which way to go.
Yeah. And you hear, research the differences and then see which one you want. If the goal is to make more money on your book, you definitely self-publish, because nobody's gonna walk around and give you $100,000
Yeah.
for your
Yeah.
book.
In traditional publishing, you don't make money. You really
Right.
don't. I think
Right.
self-publishing, you'd make more money.
Yeah. But this is wonderful. Thank you so much. The most important thing and the most powerful thing, I believe that a human being can do anything. And when we have people that believe in us, we usually stand up taller. I believe that your father and your uncle were pouring into you, especially your father pouring into you, not even with expectation that you will tell this story, but in with expectation that you will do something powerful in the world.
Oh, that's beautiful. You're making me emotional. Uh, um, so both of my parents said I would have been named John B. And that came with a big responsibility. And the fact that you said your heartfelt words, that means a lot to me, the power of the word. And thank you so much, Denise. You're pretty awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Before you go, there are 3 questions I love to ask my guests. Number 1 is, what's a bold promise that you can share with the audience?
Bold promise. I can promise you that this World War II story reads with the intensity of a novel, but it's a true story. It's where courage, sacrifice, and personal connection collide. At the heart of it are the 2 navigators, the 2 B-24 navigators. So it's a very personal story. I can promise you that.
What's a bold statement that you might share that will cause a paradigm shift?
I kind of touched on this before, but we remember the battles of World War II, but wars are often decided by energy, fuel. But we need to remember why. It's really those commanders.
Yeah.
They send young men to war, and I think we need to remember that.
Yes.
If we don't remember these stories, war becomes abstract, and we don't remember the true cost of war.
What do you think we can, well, before, let me give you the 3rd question, and then I'll come back to this. What's a bold move that you'd like to make in the future?
So, of course, I'd like to get it to a wider audience. That's my main goal, is to let everybody know what John B. and Bob did, which is not unlike other servicemen. It's a visual book. It's cinematic. So exploring that path would probably be something exciting. It has all the elements. It has history, tension, and deeply personal stakes. So, of course, I'd like it to get to a wider audience.
I'd love to invite you to our annual authors conference. This year, it's September 17th to the 20th in Rockland, New York.
In where, New York?
Rockland.
Rockland. Is that outside of New York City?
Yes, it is upstate. It's an hour from New York City.
If I can work it, it's September 17th. I'd love to.
Okay, please save the date.
I've got it written down.
All right. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your beautiful message. I think that it is beautiful because of all of the characters that was involved. So, but it's also beautiful because you decided to share this story in such a way.
Well, you're a sweetheart, and I thank you so much for having me on the show. You've got a great show with great authors. You really have a great, wonderful thing going.
Thank you. Guys, that is Jan Cress Dondi. And Jan, thank you for spending more than a decade making sure John B. White and Bob Cress's story were just not statistic, it was real. And thank you again for the Navigator's letter and all of the things that you've done towards making this book come out and sharing a little bit of insight of what it was like during that time, the true story of 2 World War II airmen. I really appreciate this book. Please come again for future endeavors, or maybe we'll see you in September.
That sounds wonderful. I've got it on my calendar. I hope so.
And for everyone listening, if you are interested in writing a book, or maybe you're writing a book already and you feel stuck, or you don't know what to do, you are overwhelmed, I have a writing community and we meet every Wednesday and every Sunday. So if you're interested, you can send me an email to authordnicholson@gmail.com, or you can follow me on Instagram at author Denise Nicholson for more information. Thank you for listening, and please go out and purchase these books, okay? If you have a parent or a grandparent or anyone in your life who served, this book is for you. So please go out there and support our authors, share this episode, and leave us a review. And we will see you next time on the Bold Book of the Day show.
Thank you for joining us for the Bold Book of the Day with Dr. Denise Nicholson, a central hub and a safe space for authors to share their stories. Follow Dr. Denise on Facebook and Instagram at Denise Nicholson, or go to denisenicholson.com. Remember, no one can share your story better than you.